Hello, everyone. My name is Amir Vasquez, and along with my partners Isaac Guerrero, Catherine Ramos, and Mike Pinta, we're going to discuss Alice Walker everyday use. But in what context? Well, we're focused on heredity and how it affects not only the story as a whole, but our everyday lives. We're going to discuss one important question. In regard to African American people, what is more important? A family that considers that their own values are most important to be inherited, or a family that prefers cultural ideas and meanings to be inherited. In my mind, what is most important for a black family? Well, that's a really, really tricky question. As we can see in the text, Dee, she's like, she went to college, she has all this knowledge in her head, and one could argue that this knowledge is not from her race itself, but from white people trying to understand African American culture. Maybe like, how do I say this? Make it more beautiful, more like some sort of art. Maybe that's why the when she goes back to her family's house, she sees all these subjects like museum pieces. She doesn't treat them like the normal everyday objects they are. Like the title of the work says, everyday use, they are everyday use objects. Maybe that's because the has all this external knowledge, not only of her culture, but of her culture viewed with white people lenses. Now, on the other side, we have Maggie. She sees these subjects as they are. She needs, in fact, one of them, the quilts, because she's going to marry soon. So maybe they are in use for her. Maybe she can use them. Whereas Dee just wants to preserve them. So we have those polar opposites. Now, which one of them is right? Well, at the end of the story, we see that their mother, she decides to give the kilts to Maggie. And Dee, angry, she leaves and tells them um, that they they will never understand that new day, the new day, in her words. What is in this new day? Maybe this new day for African culture to thrive in America. But Maggie smiles. Now, this is important. Why does Maggie smile? Well, I think that she's smiling because it is Dee who does not understand the true meaning of heritage. Those quilts are not museum pieces. For Maggie, they are her mother's heritage to her, like for so she can use them, not for amazement, nor for display, not for so she can conserve them in some sort of cultural movement. She just wants to use them because it's part of their family. So, what I infer from this ending is that, in the context of this text, obviously, family is more important. Family heredity is more important, obviously, in the context of this text. Now, if we take this and expand it to the whole world, whole African American world, is it true? Personally, I think it is. I think family is more important than cultural heredity, family heredity. And why is that? Well, I personally think that cultural values and traditions, they are really important. Yes, yes, they are. But that's and this is a very important but. I actually think that if a family is well organized, they know where they come from. They are smart enough to understand where they are and where they came from. They can transmit not only their um, their personal beliefs, but the beliefs of their whole culture. Okay, so for example, we have this family who they don't really know where their traditions and cultural values come from. They just spread them to their children without knowing what they truly are, what they mean. And this is obviously lost between generations if one is not cultural enough, doesn't understand well their culture. This happens. In this instance, I think it's very important that family values, meanings, beliefs are translated to their children more than culture, because for them culture is just like speaking blank words. They don't really understand it. The children won't understanding. They will just do it because they were taught to do it. I think culture must have passion. One must have passion for culture for it to thrive. That's why I think that families, values, meanings, they are more important than cultural meanings and values because of how the world works. And also, as the text says at the end, um, cultural values can be misrepresented. As we can see here, D actually she treats their she treats her culture, I think, as a museum, as a display piece, not as her own, not as her passion. She just treats her as she's watching them, all her traditions. She's watching them through a glass. It's not part of her. She learned all these things about her culture, but she doesn't feel it. She just wants to display them. Whereas Maggie and her mother, they truly understand. Maybe they don't know where they come from, but they know that they instead prefer to focus on their family, on what's important for them. So recapping, I personally think that families, values, and traditions, everything is more important to be inherited than cultural ideas and meanings. Obviously, it depends of the family. If a family is knowledgeable enough, I think it's better to transmit these cultural values and everything. But generally speaking, family is more important. Now, before I leave you to my other partners and their ideas, I have to clarify. I am in no position to decide what a black family should think and should inherit. They're just my ideas, as I said, because I'm not black, and I also think that these subjects are better treated within the black community, and white people should be left out of it because they simply don't have the context. They may know what they have been through, but as I say, it's not them. It's not their own passion. It's not. They're just watching it. They believe about it, but they don't feel it. And I think that's very important.
In everyday use, we have a conflict of cultures. Let's remember our three characters, Mother, Dee, and Maggie. Mother is the one who is closest to how African Americans were in the past, and Maggie and Dee are like the more current generation about this. and they are currently having access to education, which Mama couldn't have. Maggie have always seemed to be closest to the family, while Lee have been a bit more independent. We can even see that she doesn't like this idea of being black farmers. Uh, we can always see her discussing with her friends and always being with this a more American side rather than their own family side. But when Dee comes again to the house, we can see that she's starting to have this cultural disassociation because while in the past she we can say that she was like really American in the cultural way, she started to see her roots back. But we can appreciate that she really doesn't have any interest in their cultural uses or their cultural importance of anything that have to be with mama, but rather she sees this new cultural inheritance as a status point. When Dee takes the quilt, she doesn't seem like care about the family importance about the quilts, but rather about the history of the quilts, like they were some sort of artifacts to be kept in a museum. That's why when Mama told her that Maggie was going to have them when she was going to get married, she became furious because she said that they were going to be destroyed. And of course, if we see it on a point that, from a history point, of course, you don't want them to be destroyed or to be modified. But what happens when she tells her it doesn't matter if for some reason it gets a bit destroyed or a bit tarnished, you can always quilt some back more. And since Maggie was learning about quilting, which that was something that was from cultural importance from her family because all their generations knew about quilting, we can see that Dee really is more detached of this of their family culture than everyone else in the family. Dee saw this quilt as a memory of the past. But honestly, the quilt was just something that was being carried by generations because of their significant cultural importance that they have to like give something to inherit, and it was meant to inherit it across the times. If they took these quilts, then it will lose their true purpose, which was to make pass them all by all the generations. And she still failed to see this because she thought of these quilts like they were meant to tell a history about their past. But by doing this, she's cutting the true purpose of it. And let's remember that by these times there were these Black Power movements, and she truly felt like she needed to have something to represent on because she could only say, well, I have only been on a high school with lots of American teachings. And when she started to learn about her past, she started to become more attached to it, but she wasn't really more attached to it. She just knew about the history, but she was so detached by now that she started to see more like it will be good to have this memory of the past, but not thinking about the future of her own culture, which will be basic what her family has been doing and was her mother intended to give these quilts to Maggie because she knew that if the quilts were passed to Maggie, she already knew how to quilt, she will continue the purpose of this of why they were made these quilts.
Uh, Corresponding to the common question of the group, I think that if you think I heard it from a special community of people in a country, you can use the family heritage and the cultural heritage. However, we can consider that in the African American culture, I think that a mix arose from the family heritage and the cultural heritage because it's a group of people a community that has a lot of meanings and events that uh, build up the heritage that they conserve and believe. So I think that in the African American families, the community, the heritage from about the slavery, the the civil war, it's a common fact that affect and change the history of every family in the African American culture. Because if you consider that the African American culture has a lot of events that involves of the community, some of the aspects that affect and make the change in that event will change the conception of the community of the heritage in the family. So I think that there are no there are the both are important to build up the heritage of a person, of a family, of a community, because uh, as a small community, a small group in a country like the United States, you can consider that the African American culture has a lot of nexus between the family heritage and the community heritage, because uh, something like some event like the Civil War, the slavery process, the the Harlem the Harlem process will build up the heritage and have uh, the same persons that represent the fights against the system, against the violence, like Malcolm X, Martin Luther King, that they are symbols to the African American community heritage and the families of African American uh, heritage. So you can consider that they are not more important, because if you can see the everyday use, that the D has an important nexus to the pieces of the her family heritage, like the kitchen pieces, the kids, the kills. So I think that represents all the African American community heritage, because the people that made that these objects also passed from a lot of process, like the Civil War, the liberation, the slavery process. So I think that the object that the D is wanting to have represent also the community and the family heritage, because they fought the same problems in the past, and they continue fighting the the racisms or the injustice problems in the present. Also, the Dia at the end of the story tells Maggie that she will make something else being out of the house of her mom, but this is this is the situation of Maggie as a person that went out, see the reality, but if you go to the countryside of the United States, a lot of people think that the past didn't the past didn't the time didn't pass, so it continued to be like, if you are an African American African American person, you will do this, and you can never imagine to be something else, like your parents or your community, under your close community or your family, because you didn't have the possibilities and you didn't see the the cities, the change that have been passing in the years of the 20th century. So I think that's all about my opinion.
Hello, my name is Caterina Ramos, and I would like to share my opinion about what is more important within Afro families. If the heritage of values in the family, or the ideas and the meanings of the culture where it comes from. from the perspective that proposed the writing of All Everything Use of Alice Walker. First, it can be observed that the quotes that are mentioned within the reading are pieces of living story, that they are documented on the cloth, and that the life of the various generations and the judgments that they had to face. For Mama, the quilt served him as a testimony of the story of pride and fight of a family. Despite the limitations that poverty is present and the lack of education, the mother considers that her personal history as one of the few treasures that is left on her heritage. Even though it is not financed, this quilts and gives her help and record and recognize where it comes from, and that you would like to have your daughter understand that. Therefore, there is a perspective that mothers and grandmothers within the Afro families provide their following generations with empirical knowledge. That the story they want us to listen to, and which they should be their own story, building a legacy. The people who self-identify as Afro-descendants have kept an internal fight for their whole life, while they can be appreciated in the text, that the name is changed because they don't know when to accept their day name is of the oppressor, and therefore they are the records and suffering that they had, but they realize that is not the only story that Africans have spent, and those who have survived in slavery recognize that is not the only story they tell us. But we understand that there is the monarchies and imperial that also is a history and heritage, and we must accept it as ours. So the most important thing is the assimilation of these two factors, the values of the family and the ancestral and cultural family inheritance, is to accept that there is a connection between the heritage of your family and the ancestral history is important within the recognition and identification, and not living in this way. You can feel complete in both aspects and be aware of the family values and the way and the accept you really are. In this way, you can document in the same way so that you can know the future generations. Thank you.